Today I have Christian Mack. Man, I'm super excited about this interview. He has taken the startup business, building it from the late 90s, early 2000s to a 9-figure exit. He is one of the OG guys that started out of his house having 14 people working 24 hours a day, kind of hot cotting, rotating through, working out of the basement, sleeping on the road trip between jobs, and then really making every trial and error mistake that you could possibly make in starting a business. Now has grown that into a fund that has had over 30 exits for people that are doing enterprise software. It is mind-blowing. There's some little nuggets in there about how he's given back, how he's connected with mentors, masterminds, and without giving everything up in this preview, I just want you to listen in. There are some of these key things that he has learned about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to attorneys that then layered him into building a family office and this legacy investment strategy that is applicable to everyone looking to invest today. Hey everyone, man, I am super excited today because I get to interview a friend of mine, Christian Mack. So Christian is someone I've met, it's probably been a year, maybe 2 years now, that we got a chance. We are part of a mastermind group together and sitting down, hearing, a little bit of your story. I hope that it doesn't, put too much light on it, but you kind of come in as this very kind of unassuming, but you're like an assassin. Like you are such a high level ninja financial person that when I sat down and started hearing your story, I was completely enthralled. And just the way that you think about that. And so, maybe, what I can do is I'll give you as far as your background that I've heard and interpreted it, and then allow you to kind of take that from that level and then go a little bit deeper, if that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jake, thank you again for having me.
No problem. So like people like Christian is like, I don't say Rain Man, but I was like, he's
You don't want me to go into a casino. I guarantee you that.
I was like count cards, like, doing all of these things. And to me, venture capital investing is kind of like gambling in most cases. And so like when people will say, oh, I do venture capital, I invest into companies, I kind of like a little suspect already. But then to hear Christian actually explain some of these things, I was just like, wow, that's smart. It's really, really clever the way that he approaches it. So, and I think that comes from your background. You travel around a lot. Your dad was a missionary, church planter. Kind of call it an entrepreneur for Christ, so to speak. So you traveled a lot, but then your formal education was University of Chicago, mathematics. So for people that don't know, University of Chicago is like a wicked hard, economics, mathematics, very difficult university to get into. And the fact that he did that shows to a certain level of chops. And so when he mentioned that, I was kind of already like, wait, that's hard to get into. So, super interesting there. You got into IT, late 90s, and then you kind of grew that. You started a software company. You then sold that for, millions, hundreds of millions, lots of, multiples of what you've grown that company over time. And now you've taken that money and started investing it kind of VC, venture capital kind of thing. Can you take that, what I've given as far as a little bit of your background, and then say, of those, how'd you get started in IT that wasn't just your ability to kind of spell IT?
Yes, absolutely. So, gosh, yes, when I went to University of Chicago, I was actually on my way to get a PhD in mathematics. Realized very quickly it was a very humbling experience, and it's a great school. But quite frankly, if you don't want to go into academia, especially with math, it's not something that is for the faint of heart. So, but ironically, I put myself through school by taking on the odd IT job, and also through student loans. And so I was working full time. I was as a teacher's assistant. I graded papers, and I went to school full time, and all at the same time. And even despite all that, as I was turning into my senior year, I realized that I had, 6 figures of student loan debt, that was kind of assigned to me. So regardless of best efforts, and that was a lot. And at the time, it was 1998. At the time, I had the opportunity to continue on with my PhD, actually in Caltech. But instead of doing that, I decided, I was getting all these recruiters calling my home phone, and this is back in the days where cell phones were still somewhat unique. My pager would go off because I was still working full time, and so I get paid from time to time. And anyway, so I don't know how these recruiters got my information, but regardless, it was very interesting to me to see the demand that was back there in IT, because I'd always loved computers. Ironically, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have been a comp sci major versus a math major, because as a kid, I would just put together computers, quite selfishly, so that I could play video games. So that was kind of fun. And I would mow lawns, and I would shovel snow, and all this stuff to actually accomplish that. But regardless, as I went to my senior year, I was getting some pretty significant job offers. 6 figures back in '98 was, still is a very significant amount of money, especially for someone who's recently college grad. So I did that, and then I realized very quickly that I didn't necessarily like being a W-2 employee, just because I was an enterprise IT consultant, and the work was interesting, but the politics just weren't something that I was terribly interested in. And so I decided to, and it was all enterprise IT consulting, so we were doing very large projects, very complicated projects to Fortune 500 companies, which was a great experience. But ultimately speaking, as I like to joke around, there's only so much billable time in the day. And I was seeing a situation where, quite frankly, back in those days, they were taking kids that were right out of college, like myself, and they were billing them out for like $300 an hour, $400 an hour. And a lot of the folks didn't necessarily know what they were doing. It was kind of on the job training. But again, they were just, there was a situation where everyone thought the world was going to fall apart due to Y2K. There was this pent up demand. And so, I just kind of happened to fall into that just because I like to play computer games. and so anyway, a long story short, at that point, decided to start a software company. And so, because I started to see a repeated project come up over and over again, it was really a project around automation. And so there were lots of situations in businesses back in those days, cable companies, financial services companies, where if you had an issue, you had to call somebody up, and you had, not physically, but either physically or over the phone, you would need to just talk to a person and try to describe who you were, verify a bunch of information, and then that information would be escalated to a level 2 person, and so forth and so on. And I remember sitting on the phone with a tier 1 cable provider who shall not be named for, I think it was like 5 hours, and it was just like, this is crazy, as a consumer. And so I thought, well, there's an opportunity here to really create a software product, because again, there's only so much billable time in the day, but software is something where if you create something that's commercially off the shelf available, then it's something that's very, very scalable. And so we actually started Resolve back in 1999. I actually, it's kind of a funny story, but started, called to a bunch of people, actually called my parents first and said, hey, this may not work, because I actually did this because I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I got really inspired, because I felt like I was beating my head against the wall going, look, I'm making 6 figures, but unfortunately after taxes and so forth, I'm going to be like 60 years old by the time I pay off my student loans. And that just didn't seem to reconcile with me very well. And so I said, what can I do? I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I said, I need to become a business owner. what can I do? And, while real estate seemed very interesting, I had absolutely no background in real estate, but I did have a background in IT. So I felt like, well, why don't I just start a business? So I called up my parents and I said, look, I'm probably going to fail. And so if I do fail, can I move back in? Which they said, absolutely, after a long pause, of course. And then at that point, called up a bunch of people that I thought I could train up in this world, because back then there weren't too many people that really knew much about, technology, that weren't really trained on operating systems, applications. It was, not even at University of Chicago, computer science wasn't even a major or a minor. It was kind of like an elective course, believe it or not. And there was a bunch of elective courses, but it wasn't really something that I think people thought would really catch on. And so I actually, at that point I had just purchased my first, my house. It was a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house in Chicago. And I called up a bunch of people and I said, hey, I don't know if I can't really pay you market, but, I think I can give you room and board and pay you something, would you kind of sign up to this crazy initiative? And they did. And we had 13 people living in a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house for about a year. And it was crazy days, right? It was working 7 days a week. I'd show up at the client at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I would work, 12 hours, 13 hours, 14 hours. I get home and I would basically go into the basement where we had carpeted the basement. We had put up whiteboards where there's supposed to be drywalls and put 6 desks down there. And all of us would just work around the clock. Saturdays, we worked around the clock. Sundays were actually recruiting days. So we'd actually put a barbecue together and try to recruit, some other crazy folks to join the initiative and so forth. And we did that. And within the first year, we actually had exceeded expectations. We had closed well over $1 million in revenue, which was pretty fantastic. We weren't expecting to be as successful as we were. And again, it started out in services, but we started working on the software too. And that basically led to $2.5 million in revenue the second year, and it just kept on going up and up and up, and ultimately resolved. It's still around today. When I kind of left it, it was went from 0 to basically 50 million in revenue, but we did it all the hard way. We didn't take on, I didn't have any mentors. We didn't take on any investment capital. It was all kind of organic growth. And so we did that. Then we transitioned from services into software, and the software was typically sold to telecommunications, financial service companies, and the Department of Defense. And we actually, did really well during the dot-com implosion and the Great Recession. What a lot of people don't understand is certain segments within enterprise software do extremely well during downturns, and that's because Fortune 500 companies have to figure out how to deliver the same service or product with more efficiency, right? Because usually a lot of times, there's less people that they can, keep on board, or for instance, in a COVID situation, right? Everyone's working remote. So how do you provide that, with all these additional complexities and limited resources? And so these segments do well in those cases because Fortune 500 companies turn to, segments, enterprise software segments like automation, collaboration, companies like Zoom, for instance, to really drive those efficiencies. When I say enterprise software, just to define that, I really mean software that is business to business. So you're big companies that people would recognize would be like SAP, right? Salesforce, IBM, Oracle. These are big companies, but believe it or not, there's a lot of smaller companies out there that really provide a tremendous amount of value to the space. So the Great Recession hit, and actually we grew like crazy during that time. So much so that we ultimately sold in 2012 and had a successful exit. Ultimately was 9 figures, which was great. And then I decided to take that was kind of I was gonna effectively retire. I think that stuck for about 3 minutes because as much as I do like golf, I can't be out there for 4 or 5 hours. It drives me a little batty, and I'm not very good at it. So even though I love it, and so I decided, what the heck should I do now? And so I actually started a family office at that point to effectively look at investing, the capital that we had generated, into other different kind of asset classes directly. And so we did that. And then in 2014, because I started to interact with other family offices, other people that had similar bigger exits. and they were looking to invest too, a lot of the times people would say, hey, I made my money in commercial real estate, Christian, I found this technology deal, would you look at this? And I would joke around and I would say, well, I think you'd have, better odds of going to Vegas than you would actually getting your money back on this deal, because a lot of stuff was pre-revenue. Jake, to your point, it was venture capital, right? Oh, this is going to be the next, Yahoo or whatever, next unicorn. And I was always a big believer that, while I'm a big advocate in small, medium-sized businesses, especially those that can get above $1 million a year in specifically in enterprise software, that if you're going to invest in something pre-revenue or whatever, that's a real big gamble. But there's a lot of other great companies out there that really, like myself, right, kind of just started by happenstance, and ultimately speaking needed that guidance to really kind of grow up, but had for whatever reason hit kind of a glass ceiling. And so kind of that aha moment started, where I realized, well, why don't we create a fund where people aren't just kind of interacting. Family offices aren't just interacting with one another and syndicating different types of deals. This is a very specific strategy around something that I know very well. And so what I did is I actually took 2 years. I wrote a 300-page methodology that said, hey, depending on certain sizes of companies, you're going to hit certain resistance points, and at that point, you're going to really need kind of best practices to be implemented in basically what we call value add here, in order to punch through those resistance points. And in my experience in enterprise software, you have resistance points at the first million, then it's 2.5 million, then it's 5, then it's 10, then it's 20, and then it actually goes up to 50. And I know this really well because it wasn't like our business went from 0 to 50 million. It wasn't like this hockey stick, right? It would go up for a while, then it would come down, then it would go up. It was kind of a roller coaster ride of sorts. And so kind of learn things certainly the hard way. But we wrote this great methodology that became the investment thesis around what is Lotus today, which we're on our third fund. But our whole strategy was, let's find these dusty assets, these assets that have hit a plateau, that are too big for venture capital, because traditional venture capital, they're looking for opportunities where it's like straight up north, right? It's not just a hockey stick, right? It's almost like, grow at any cost. Again, not something that I believe in personally. But a lot of these companies are too small for traditional private equity companies. And what do I mean by that? Well, believe it or not, at least in the enterprise software space, you have to be a certain size, before a traditional private equity company will actually buy you. And that's primarily because, private equity folks are filled with, a lot of folks that, worked on Wall Street, right? They worked at Goldman Sachs, they work at Merrill Lynch, and then they go out and they start their own fund, and they bring with them the backing behind the bank that they used to work with. In addition to that, they bring with them a client list, and they open up a strategy, and they'll invest in different things, whether it be, fixed income, real estate, what have you. But a lot of those folks have financial engineering background. They don't have operator background. And of course, my background and our background as a team here is mostly filled with, folks that have had successful exits. So they have been operators, they have grown companies from scratch, and they have had multiple exits. In fact, over 30 exits, the team here has had to date. And so, bringing to bear all of those folks, in addition to those financial services experts as well on our team, I thought, well, there's a perfect opportunity where we can take these assets, we can implement our best practices, right? And we do take control, because God forbid the founder gets hit by a bus. But quite frankly, the founder usually is more of a technologist anyway, and so they really want to focus on the product strategy, which is in the equivalent of real estate. Location is everything in real estate. Well, in the enterprise software realm, the product is everything. So if we can underwrite and make sure that product is very, very valuable to the marketplace, then it's really just a matter of fixing the back office, implementing our value add in back office, front office, and bringing a CEO that has been through those successful exits in that space. And Fund 1 did extremely well. 2.3 times return in 3 years. Fund 2 did 42% IRR, 36.5% net IRR in 4 years. Let's see, Fund 3 just started up, late last year, and we're kind of off to the races. But anyway, that's kind of my story and how I kind of fell into some of this stuff.
So that's like I said, people like, maybe for me, individually, I geek out on this stuff, but I had a couple questions that came up during that time period. You said that you were getting recruited. while at the University of Chicago, or maybe just leaving in what, kind of your IT tech experience, how did you land on enterprise software? Was it
Oh,
something
sure.
that recruiter pitched that? Did it just, how did you first land in that place?
So a lot of the systems that I had been working on, believe it or not, were already enterprise software. So big universities like University of Chicago, they're filled with enterprise software applications. And so the reason why I think I was specifically targeted so much from recruiters is because I had had that experience. And ironically, I actually started my first full-time, outside of school job a month ahead of when I was supposed to graduate. So during that month, I would actually start with third shift. So I would actually do consulting. And again, I know this sounds crazy, but back in the 90s, everyone was so worried about Y2K that they literally had three shifts. And so I was brought on board a month before I graduated. And I remember during that time, the only way I slept was in the car going back and forth through work Monday through Friday and then on the weekends because I would go to school. I would still do my W-2 job, do my TA job, grade papers, and then I would go to work at night. and so, and so, uh, but what was funny was that at night, I thought that, being a W-2 employee was going to be really, really complicated, especially as a consultant and so forth. But quite frankly, it was because I had all that experience. It was a lot easier for me than a lot of other folks to pick up, kind of what the role and responsibility was. So, which was great for me because then, effectively because it was third shift and there was not much going on. Well, hopefully, sometimes there was some stuff that went down, which was always an emergency. Then I basically started picking up books and I started reading about other applications, more sophisticated applications, which then helped me, extend my expertise and so forth. And so, that's kind of how I fell into it. It was never really recruited, by Silicon Valley. It was always, more traditional big, kind of consulting firms, that had large clients out there because that was definitely the demand because all these Fortune 500 companies had to figure out, what was your Y2K strategy? How can you prevent the clocks from basically flipping instead of to 2000 flipping back to 1900 and things of that nature.
That's interesting. Yeah, it was kind of like the internet was starting at that era.
Oh yeah.
I was, just, in college, call it, 99. And I remember even being kind of same thing. It might've been 96. I wanted to sign up for fantasy football and I had to go like ask for an email. And I was like, hey, this thing's asking for an email. Like, I don't have an email. Like, how do I get that?
Oh yeah.
It was like,
Yeah, I thought who's ever going to use this stuff other than academics? But it's kind of a cool system to send mail. Who would have thought, right?
yeah. So I wanted to find out what an email so I could sign up for fantasy football because I really liked that when I was a senior in high school. So you mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad was like one of those like aha light bulb moments for me. Same thing. Like I was in the Army when somebody gave me that. And I was trying to like figure out what I was going to do when I grew up and kind of once I got out of the Army and I read and I was just like, wow,
yeah,
this like, and it's not like it's, super technical, but it's just like,
Well, Jake, back in those days, you may recall, like there was nothing like that on. I mean, absolutely nothing in the bookstores. Not that there's bookstores today, but I mean, you go to the bookstore and there is nothing like that out there. And yeah, I think it's Robert Kiyosaki certainly changed my life for sure. And the way that it is articulated in there really helps like even someone like myself that didn't go into real estate, right? And I was just like, but I was able to leverage my skill set because of the concepts that were abstracted out of that. So it was great. I was all in, right? Ever since I read that book and I read it multiple times, right? I bought every freaking book. Rich Dad Poor Dad. I bought the cash flow games. I played it, all with my kids, with neighbors. I mean, everyone, right? So yeah, it was a good experience.
So, obviously I went into the real estate version of that and have, done private equity real estate and kind of grew up from flipping a few houses to larger scale, working within a family office. You mentioned you had a family office, you were going to retire, you had this 9-figure kind of exit. So for the people that don't know, can you maybe kind of expand as far as what you mean by what is a family office
Yeah,
and how
absolutely.
you're clubbing that together? And then I'm going to take that back in a second after that.
Yeah. So when you do have a liquidity event, really the two options are, the traditional option is that if you effectively hire somebody else to manage that money, right? So, the Goldman Sachs, the Merrill Lynch's, the JP Morgans of the world, and they do a great job, but they do the job, for a fee, right? So whether it's a percentage of assets under management, or whether it's whatever other construct they have, that's how they get paid, right? So I felt like, again, I think those are great institutions. I think that, at the end of the day, there's a lot of good people, there. But at the end of the day, and again, I'm a math major, right? It seemed to be conflicted, right? Like I wanted to have a system by which would invest the capital that we worked so hard on, right? And do it in a way that was methodical, that was aligned with interest. So this concept of a family office has been around for hundreds of years, quite frankly, but just recently has kind of caught on, I think, in kind of more public domain. And what that, and again, if you look up the ISO standards and all that stuff, right, there is no definition of a family office, right? But I'll give you my version of it, right? It is when you decide that you don't want to necessarily have a third party manage your money, that you instead want to hire people to invest that money as you see fit, depending on your investment thesis internally, right? So, and again, you might have a shared resource, here and there, but the whole goal is that you hire people, and their whole goal is to diversify your assets into a portfolio, directly into deals. That's whether it again, they may still buy public equities, they may still buy public REITs and so forth. But a lot of times the alpha, I mean the upside, right, is there in more private deals, especially when you're dealing with folks like, and Jake mentioned it before, right? We're in a great masterminding community, and there's deals flying across all the time, right? There's deals flying across family office to family office. And so in order to kind of underwrite that deal, like you're not going to call Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and say, oh, by the way, would you mind underwriting the deal that Jake's got? Like, they're not going to do that, right? But if you have your own team, they can do that, and they can do that in a very scalable way. So in my definition, if you get to a point where you can afford to hire people, and the returns on those investments more than pay for the staff that you have on board, again, whether it's full-time or fractional, then you have a family office. And you can do this with as little as $10 million, believe it or not. And then, but really at the same time, it probably doesn't make sense until you're probably at 20 million or above. And there's family offices that are quite a bit bigger than that. So that's what I mean by a family office.
Yeah, sure. That's helpful. It was kind of the same thing. I didn't really know what they were. I worked for a high net worth, a rich guy is what I used to call it. Like, hey, there's a
Right.
rich guy and he's investing money. And so I worked for a rich guy that sold his company for $400 million, and then he was deploying capital, and I kind of was a cog in that machine. It wasn't until I started speaking at some of these things, like you said, 5, 6, 8 years ago at family offices, it was the actual definition of like, because like you said, you kind of Google it and be like, what is this? Like,
Right.
it doesn't even really exist. And so now it becomes such common language. We were talking earlier about how trial and error is a very effective teacher,
Hmm.
but probably the worst teacher of there, because you actually have to go make those mistakes. You as an operator have probably stepped in most, or if not all, the holes as an
Oh yeah.
operator kind of company. So I wanted to take that is like, when did you get a mentor, and then how has that like changed your life, or the trajectory or whatever you've been when doing? And then what does mentorship or having mentors now, when you've already had now this 9-figure kind of exit, look like? Or do you still have them?
Oh yeah. So I did as Jake, as you mentioned, right? I did everything the hard way, right? So I hit every freaking pothole I think known to man along the way. That's why it was such a roller coaster ride. And that's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to start a fund, because I wanted to actually mentor other folks, that were having similar challenges that for whatever reason just you were stuck. But actually, believe it or not, as we were going to sell the company, I was doing a lot of estate planning, and back then, back in 2010, 2011, there wasn't and to some degree this is less true today than it was back then, but there was no like go to, hey, I'm about to have a 9-figure exit, law firm, come to me, I'll show you how to structure everything efficiently, right? There was nothing like that. So what ultimately happened was, I spent probably around the course of about $250,000, believe it or not, between 6 law firms, and I think it was like 2010, 2011, because I knew there was something that was about to happen. I didn't know exactly what, but I figured, hey, let's take the opportunity here. We had built this company where we had lots of employees, hundreds of employees, and and so honestly, my day job was not as intense, nearly as intense as it is today. But I love what I do, so that's okay. But I was able to have time to set aside to really figure out what the state I really need to kind of put together. But it required 6 law firms, and ironically, I had actually outdone or basically outpopulated my conference room that I had, because I had so many lawyers in a conference room, because there'd be one guy that really knew about dynasty trust, and this guy really knew about accounting law and tax law and so forth. And so one of the folks actually said, "Oh, I know this gentleman, and he is, he actually is the chairman of a great bank in Southern California, and he's got a really great conference room." And so I went to that conference room, and he popped in for all of 5 minutes, and he's probably the smartest person I've ever met in my life. And I said, "Huh, that's really interesting. I wonder if he, wouldn't mind me taking him out to lunch." And not only did he answer my email right away, but he paid for lunch, and that started, basically what has still today been one of the best mentoring experiences ever. And that was the first mentor I took on, and I would call him more of a personal mentor, which then kind of beckoned the desire to say, well, maybe there's something in this mentorship, type of approach. And so, since then, I've added 3 other, mentors, folks that understand family office, folks that understand private equity, folks that just in general are really good investors. And those folks are I hold very near and dear to my heart, because, they have helped me expand tremendously, since that time, both, during the exit, post exit, during the fund launch, during the family office launch. And what I found is that those folks, it's not like they're looking for anything in return. They're just looking to help. And that was something that sincerely I really appreciate. And for me personally, I think I do this as a part of Lotus, as we're helping out these other companies, but I do it, also outside of Lotus too, with other, folks that are starting up. And even though I may not necessarily understand the expertise, like, you don't want to come to me to underwrite a real estate deal, but, strategically, right, there may be a need to have a sounding board for, whatever the topic du jour is. And if it's not something I know, then usually it's someone that, either I know of a person who does know, or that know of a person who may know someone who knows. So, and that's something I'm really kind of passionate about.
So is there any commonality of people that have been mentors in your life that they've done? Is there a common theme? Because I know that's the way that you kind of think, obviously, that the first order and first principles of, you're sitting down doing enterprise software and you're like, hey, I keep having the same problem over and over. Like, we could build something for that. Has there then been translated something that you've seen or gained from a personal mentor or investor mentor or whatever, something that they're doing that has like a common denominator that has been effective or valuable for you?
Yeah, I'd say that all the mentors that I've had personally are very holistic, right? So, yeah, they may have been really super successful career-wise, or super successful investment-wise, or in private equity, but they're very holistic. They really have a giving nature. They want, they desire, the ability to really, give back, because I think in many ways, like myself, I feel like, we're very blessed with regards to, the success that we've had, right? And so if I can parlay that success down to folks who are needing or in need of that, kind of, the pearls of wisdom, then that's great. And again, it's not like my advice is always 100% by any stretch of the imagination, and neither is theirs, by the way. But just having kind of that sounding board and someone to run ideas by, especially given the track record and their experiences, and where they can legitimately show up and say, well, yeah, I've been in that situation. This is what I did. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. And it's not really it's not saying, hey, you should do this, Jake, or you should do that. That's not what a good mentor does. It's more about reflecting about their experience, so that you can kind of take that in as inputs and then go, oh, okay, and derive your own conclusions, right? And, a lot of times I'll go back to my mentors and like, well, I decided to go down this path and it didn't really work out that well. And they'll say, well, that's okay. Yeah, I was never going to tell you what to do. That's not the role of a mentor, but I wouldn't have done it that way. And here's the reasons why. And, here's some additional information. And that closed loop resolution process is super helpful. And it helps you really kind of gain, a higher level of, problem solving, type of approach, I think.
So you and I are in a mastermind together. I know that you're part of other groups and other masterminds and stuff like that. How has that played into your, call it success or your maturation of being an investor, or a combination of that?
Sure.
How did you look out? Because for me, I actually remember listening to a podcast once and somebody like, oh man, the greatest thing that ever happened was being part of a mastermind. And I was like, what's that? Like I'm trying to Google this and I'm like, what's, or maybe the Google was around then. I think it was podcast and Google coexisted, but I was like, what's a mastermind? And I kept like looking, I was like, I had no idea what it was, but somebody mentioned that I should definitely do one. And it was huge for them.
Yeah, believe it or not, Jake, I'm actually kind of late to the mastermind game. I seem to be late at everything. So I had mentors, and then again, I just get really focused on the mission, right? What are we trying to do? How are we going to try to do this? When are we trying to get whatever done, right? And so it wasn't until probably 2018 that really I got called up by another mastermind, and they're like, hey, we would really like you to join us. This is a combination of folks that are extremely, folks that have done extremely well, blah blah blah. And I'd heard of groups, not necessarily the term mastermind, but I've heard of groups like this getting together, and I thought, yeah, I'll try it out. And that kind of begets what I see today as just a what a wonderful opportunity, right? To learn from other folks, right? And again, I believe in mentorship and all that stuff, but really masterminding is taken to a whole nother level, right? Where then you can get this great wealth of information, from multiple different perspectives, and also you can find other folks that really need help, and maybe there's not necessarily a formal mentor mentee kind of a relationship. You're not going to have someone who's going to check in every month or what have you, but you can effectively help people, in tactical problems and sometimes strategic problems as well, especially as you routinely kind of bump into them, from event to event. So I really enjoy it. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm on the road so much, is not just work, but because I'm always trying to attend all these different, mastermind sessions. So
That's always a challenge, but that's what I see as far as, so, to bring it back to Lotus and what you're doing. So, I mean, at least, again, this is an outsider's kind of perspective of what you're doing, and maybe add some clarity around this is if I misspeaking as far as, but you're acquiring SaaS enterprise software companies that have, call it, I don't know, $1 to $10 million in revenue, that have had some kind of scale issues. And oftentimes the founder doesn't know how to run enterprise sales team. They're good at whatever their problem that they solved, but now actually running an effective business is, so they've hit a wall, they've hit that glass ceiling, they've stubbed their toe, whatever that metaphor that you want to use is, that they're coming up to a problem and maybe they're not even profitable. Like they're losing money. Like, man, I'm pouring $1 million a year into this stupid company and it's stressing me out. My marriage is failing, like all of those other things. Like I see you guys are what this Lotus company is you've had 30 successful exits. You've been an operator that's taken something full cycle into a 9 kind of figure, component. So like, diving into that, like what is the ideal problem that you're helping to solve
Sure.
these people? And then how does that translate into kind of that mentorship or mastermind component of what you've personally been experiencing over the last 10 years, 5 years?
Yeah. So, the analogy that I always like to use is we walk into situations much like those who are, in real estate, right? Where they come across a great location, but the building itself, just has, it just needs a lot of work, right? It's not been renovated for quite some time. The rents are low and so forth. And so what we come in is we have a value add team that comes in, paints the walls, right? Gets the landscaping correct, right? Maybe there's some back end stuff, back office stuff, or what we call it, right? Like electric, plumbing, right? That need to get redone to make it a real Class A building or a Class A, real estate investment. And at that point, right, you can really, get that rental income, higher, right? Which generates profits and so forth. And that's really what we do, right? We do that in the enterprise software world. So we buy companies, you got it right, Jake, between 1 and 10 million of revenue. So these companies usually have 20 some odd Fortune 500 companies, which is really hard to do. If you're a vendor at JP Morgan, the amount of people that have to underwrite your technology is incredible because JP Morgan doesn't want to add another vendor to their list. The only reason why if they could buy something similar, even if it's more expensive, so with Oracle or IBM, they will totally do that. The only reason why they wouldn't do that is if you're providing some sort of functionality that is just not available in some of the bigger shops. And so that in and of itself is a big kind of key to us. The fact that it's post revenue, right? It's producing revenue. A lot of times they're actually making some money, just not a lot. And they can benefit from our value add. So we come in and again, usually the founder is more of a technologist. They're more of a product guy. That's all they want to do is really, be innovative. And we come in and we say, hey, look, you don't have to worry about the back office anymore. We're going to take 51%, and so we're going to take control, but you're still going to have 49%. And we're going to come in, we're going to fix the front office. So in the real estate analogy, right, we're going to do all the things that are visual to people. We're going to do the stuff on the back office, the stuff that people don't see, like plumbing, electric, and all that good stuff. And then we're going to come in and we're going to have a property manager, right, or a CEO come in, and that is really good at what they do, and they're going to make sure that this building is operating at high efficiency, and that creates a tremendous lot of value. And it's at that point, that we really help that founder see what is possible, why they were really hitting their head against the wall, repeatedly, and why, this best practice really works. And it's in that mentorship that they start to see, not always, right, but they start to see that, hey, this is what I was doing wrong before. And, they start to learn. And so the whole goal is that when we do have ultimately an exit, because when we buy companies, we typically buy companies, we pay companies between 1 and 2 times revenue. But when we go to sell them, it's usually between 5 to 8 times revenue. But ironically, we're about to actually go IPO with one of our portfolio companies, and this might be we believe a strategy, going forward with Fund 3. They're getting like 15 times, revenue, and so you can see the huge value. So if you bought something for even 2 times revenue, and you're selling it for 15, right? That's 7.5 times the return in a fairly short order. In fact, company that we actually invested in February is about to go IPO in the next couple of weeks. And that's, by the way, that's a very short period of time. But we do all this stuff in an actually very tax efficient manner too, because we leverage a program called QSBS, which again, talk to your tax professional. But if we hold these assets for call it 5 years, then actually there's no capital gain. So it's kind of like the equivalent like a 1031 exchange in many ways, even though you actually get the cash back. But basically what that means is that federally speaking, there's no federal capital gains, which is a really nice incentive, for our investments. But in the meantime, we disperse, we do a dividend from the underlying companies. It's it's an 8% pref that we target to be an 8% preferred return that happens every quarter, and that's what we target. And then ultimately, we have a liquidity partner for those who, for whatever reason, want to necessarily get cashed out every quarter as well, which that comes at a 20% discount to NAV, which is kind of interesting too. But But meaning that when this IPO, for instance, happens, even though there's a 7.5 return, folks can get out for effectively six times return, which is kind of nice, because we have an insurance or we have a secondary liquidity provider that is backed by insurance companies that loves these types of assets. But getting back to the mentorship, the opportunity for us really is when that founder, when we sell that company, right? So when we have that exit event, not only have they seen all this stuff, but then they themselves become a person by which has not only learned a lot, but can actually turn around and actually mentor other people, right? So if they, a lot of us, like once you sell your company, it's like you still want to be in the game, right? And so not everyone, but a lot of folks. And so a lot of times, what I want to do is create a system of basically incubating mentors, right, to come back to the mothership and actually do this for other folks. So if you were a founder that really got focused on their product, and then saw this great stuff and you were able to learn and really, incorporate that, then, come back and help, the next, founder, kind of do it. And that's really, gives us scale and quite honestly, me personally, a lot of energy. So.
That's really valuable, and I think it's maybe something that you're using as a sales pitch to pick up some of these companies.
Oh yeah.
One of the questions, man, I feel like VC valuations or company valuations sometimes are absurd. Like there's someone that was just telling me like, oh, we're valuing our company at 40 times, revenue and top line revenue. And I was just like, and you want like capital on that? Like, I was like, IPO, publicly traded companies aren't getting that, but how do you get that with $1 million, $2 million revenue? Like, that seems crazy sauce to me, but,
Yep.
how do you find these companies? Like, are they seeking you out? Are you seeking them out? Is it a combination of both of those? Because I know from real estate, we're looking at maybe sometimes market specific. We're looking for a certain deal type or in the market, we're looking for a good deal. You have a criteria, there's enterprise software, and then that's a pretty big, broad, ambiguous term to enterprise software. But then how are you finding these deals? And then how are you also able to ink at something that's 1 to 3 times revenue that then grow it to a 10, 15 times kind of revenue number?
Yeah, so all of our deals are pretty much off market. They're not represented by a real estate agent or anything like that. And you find this from time to time, I believe, in real estate where, the location is awesome, but for whatever reason, the house, just has, just kind of fallen, the building has kind of fallen to the wayside. And the real estate market is interesting in that there's a lot of people out there that are very focused on efficiently adding value add to, different types of properties. I would say, though, that there is very few, if any, firms that are out there that are focused certainly systemically on enterprise software, value add assets, especially in the lower middle market, what we call lower middle market, call it 1 to 10 times revenue. Those, there's just a lot. It's a labor of love. There's a lot of work that needs to happen, right? So if you can just imagine in the real estate world, it's like coming across this place. It's like, oh man, the location's awesome, but man, we got our work cut out for us with us, so, but that's what we do. And so, when you think about that, right, these things are not represented by real estate agent or, or investment bankers as they call it in the industry. And so they certainly find us, but we also hunt for those opportunities too. So we have, 2 people that are full-time dedicated at, looking at certain areas within the space that we know extremely well, and those opportunities do exist. And the third way that we do it is we actually have a number of investors who are actually executives, people that I've actually known for quite some time, executives within strategic customers, Fortune 500 companies, or strategic, enterprise software companies like IBM, Oracle, so forth. And those employees, those investors who are also employees or retired, they come to us every quarter. And the goal is to basically put together a technical advisory committee that helps us underwrite deals for specific specific prospects that we're looking at. from the perspective of, is this a good product? Would you buy it? Potential customer, would you partner, with this company, big, software company? And that's really good from an underwriting basis. It helps to establish a checks and balance between what we think and what the market thinks. But those people also generate a lot of deals because they, of course, run across companies that are too small to buy, the product from, or too small to really partner up with. And so we have a tremendous amount of deal flow. And one of the things that I'm also very passionate about is people don't understand a lot of times what's really happening in the enterprise software world. The big software companies out there, they really don't innovate, internally. They innovate through acquisition. And so, like a Salesforce or an Oracle, like if, they'll come across a smaller company and they'll buy it, but that company has to be a certain size. They don't buy typically very small companies, and certainly not companies that are between 1 and 10 million in revenue. They'll typically buy companies that are 20, 50, 100 million in revenue, because again, the people that are underwriting that deal for those large software companies, they have to be a certain size. But here's the issue. Thanks to the Great Recession, the capital that has traditionally been deployed in the space has been going way, way upstream, meaning that, like for instance, when I started my first company, I walked into a bank and I'm pretty sure they took my pulse and they gave me 50 grand. And they said, hey kid, don't spend this all in one place, right? And I was a part of the SBA program. But I legitimately, I think I filled out, like I signed a couple pages and that was it. That really doesn't happen today. If anyone's tried to get an SBA loan, I mean, it's pretty much, that and a proctology exam. And I think I would rather prefer the proctology exam. So, it's one of these things where, and it's because there's so much rules and regulations, and I understand, why some of that stuff exists, but, it's just harder to gain access to that private capital. What the issue is that if that private capital isn't easily accessible, to this lower middle market space, then it's really hard for companies to grow into that $20 million, $50 million, $100 million revenue space, which means that the large software companies, from an innovation perspective, are going to become less and less efficient at innovating. And so I personally think that there's, at least in the enterprise software world, potentially a very large innovation crisis kind of brewing because, and again, hopefully we meet that marker, right? We fill that gap. So that's not the case, but at the end of the day, it's something that I'm really passionate about because there's a lot of great products out there. They just need the capital. They need the value add back office, front office, and to some degree they need the leadership. And then, then it'll just kind of take care of itself. But yeah, that's what we do and why we're passionate about it.
No, I pick that up every time I'm around you and hear you kind of talk, and exactly what you said is, there's a lot of translation between what you do and kind of real estate, the same. And I know that I appreciate for translating that for the real estate folks that don't necessarily understand the private equity world or family office or enterprise software, and how to translate that to something that they would understand. I think you're onto something that is very, very unique, very special. I think it taps into, not only your passion of experience, but also, like you said, helping these other people. And there's, it's not altruistic. There's also, profits to be, realized, but I think it's across the board. You're also taking these people that maybe from a CTO, call it a quasi CTO position, started solving a problem, but most people don't know how to run businesses. It's a challenge. Running a sales team is its entire own, component. Like you said, back office, putting plumbing in, front office, redoing the lobby. A lot of those things have significant value upgrades, or you can't, for a plumbing, you can't get, through the pipeline unless it's big enough capacity. And if you don't have that, if you got one person's heading the company that's also trying to be the head salesperson, that's also trying to serve this, like you can see where there's all kinds of inefficiencies in a company that maybe is doing $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 million, and why they would fall down flat.
Absolutely. Yep, definitely.
Well, I'd like to, give people an opportunity to reach out to you if you're open to that. Maybe they have a company. Maybe they are a company that is coming and experiencing some of these problems.
Absolutely.
Maybe, it's technical people, family office. They've had their exit. They sold their manufacturing company and they want to get and reach and connect with you, some of your family office support stuff. The way that you've systematically approached things is what I find a lot of value in. You've created the system, your 300-page, manifesto of investing. I find tremendous amount of value in that. So where can people find you? Where's the best way for them? And maybe there's different channels for the different things that they potentially could reach out to you on.
Yeah. So Jake, feel free to share my information, my email, my phone number. I'm happy to help out, answer any questions, mentor folks who are in need of help, and answer any kind of questions. You have my information. Maybe we could flash it on the screen here, or what have you. I'm happy to be that point person for sure. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Christian. It was a fast, time period for me. I think I could probably dive in for many, many hours.
Absolutely. I could talk to you, Jake, for hours or days.
Exactly. So I really appreciate that, and look forward to our next time breaking some bread. Actually, I was mentioning Scott Ryan, another person. He was just like saying, man, Christian is such a workhorse. They're like, the components of that, your principles that you started your company off of, working 24 hours a day with 13 people out of a house or 14 people out of a house. You live in California, you're thinking about moving to Texas. And he was like, you can't move to Texas because I need a 2-hour head start on my day, because you're going to kill me with how much work you actually do. So maybe we'll continue this on in a round 2 conversation at some point to dive into work ethic and other things that you have untapped in your past.
That sounds great. I look forward to it.
Cheers.
Take care, my friend.
All right.